Okay. Should see an EMD chart right now.
We see it.
Okay, so what I'd like to do here this morning in the recap for some of the trades that's set up today, I'm going to show a couple of charts. So I want to start off with EMD, and I see we have some new folks in here and some folks on free trials, and just sort of learning the system as well. And I'm going to just show a couple of very simple trades that you can take after a news event. Today, if you recall, we had existing home sales and a couple other numbers. We use Forex Factory for those, consumer confidence and Richmond Manufacturing Index, all at 7 a.m. Pacific time. This is all Pacific time down here. So the open of the market, of course, is 6:30 Pacific right here, this vertical line to the left. And then your news events were right here at 7 o'clock, right there. So this was news. Here's your open over here. Now, if you're thinking about how to approach the morning in terms of sort of a checklist of things to look for, one of the first things that I do when I start looking at a market, and I usually start looking at between 6 and 6:15, so about 15 or 20 minutes before the open every day, and I look for critical areas of support and resistance, because it's not unusual for most mornings for a market to be consolidating. You can see right in here, for instance, there was a pretty well-defined resistance area going back into about 5:30 Pacific time before the open here, and then we had a fairly well-defined support area down in here. Now, if you notice these large dots here, I have a 6 range. I know Gary shows a 4 in the room. We teach either way. You can use a 4 or 6, whatever you like. Some people trade faster charts like 2s and 3s if you're scalping, and some use an 8. So it's a personal preference thing. And these dots here are a little tighter and faster than the ones you see in the room. Gary, I think, and Rich like to use a 12 range guidance. So here again, depending on your instrument and when you're trading it, that's a personal preference thing. The key here is obviously to set up the charts with the indicators that you like that make trades nice and clear for you. That's the reason we have all these tools, is so that you can set your charts up so that you can see on your own desktop what to take. Now, you can see over here, here's something I want to show, is that many days it makes sense to wait until a news event occurs. So trading basically after 7 o'clock Pacific. Because in this case here, you can see that right around, I don't know, between 6:45 and 6:50, kind of right in this area right here, you got a little what we call sort of head fake, where the market, quickly bips up through a resistance level right here like this, and then quickly pulls back into a higher level of support. So we were looking for breakout trades, and actually you got one right here. However, it came back all the way to support, and you would have felt some heat if you took it before 7 o'clock. If you get into these trades, okay, if you get into what sometimes are head fake type breakout trades before a news event, one way to manage that is let me show you specifically what I'm talking about here. Let's suppose that you had a buy order just above this 927 area and you got filled somewhere right in there, long, on a breakout, okay? And you see that it pushed up here about 10 ticks pretty quickly. Now you see the green stealthy line right here? You see the green stealthy line right here? A more aggressive stop posture would be to put a stop somewhere right in here. So in reality, if you've taken this little head fake ahead of the news, it's okay, because it probably only nicked you for a couple of ticks or maybe a scratch trade. That's the way you manage those head fakes around the open. You either do one of two things. You simply stand down until the news comes out, right? That's the one way to do it. And you can see here at 7 o'clock, right after the news, we pulled back to a higher level of consolidation around 926, right around this pivot. See how it held it? Guidance was long, so we're looking for long trades, right? Guidance was long. And sure enough, we break back up. Now, the level we broke, again, this should look familiar, is this 927.50 area. This is where I got long. This is where, after the news, this is where I bought in, inside of this circle right here. Okay? Now, you had a secondary entry here. If you didn't get long when it came through this resistance level, again, you had another breakout area that occurred right here. And this was a perfectly acceptable entry when it took out this swing all the way up here. Everybody see that? The two entries? A little bit, and some people might have actually been buying down here. This is an aggressive entry down near support. If you're nervous with that, if you get sort of beat up when you take those proby pullbacks like that, then when it took out this swing again here, 927.50 was a good entry. And then here again when it took out 28.50, this swing right here. Now you had such a strong reaction to news that not only did it blast right through this pivot, the 6/8 pivot here at 29.70, but it went all the way up here to this next pivot. Weak stop reverse 7/8 pivot at 33.60. And what you want to do here is, I'm not going to put a trade on here, but I'm going to show you a little technique, is to put your target just a couple of ticks behind where that next pivot is. This would be your target for the long trade from down in here. Okay? And when if you recall, it came, this is really strange how this happened, but it came up and it was kind of sitting right in here for a little while. See these candles just kind of sitting right in here? It was just sitting there, sitting there, sitting there. And then all of a sudden, I don't know what happened, some computerized trading or something just blasted it right up through there. So if you had a order sitting here, in all likelihood, one of these candles up in here took it out. And that's what we call, in this case here, if you were filled, I don't know, let's use a round number, 27.50 in this circle right here. And you got taken out, I don't know, 33.50 around this line right here. That trade was good for around 60 ticks or about $600, depending on where you got filled. Let's call it $500 to $600, depending on, you might have got filled here and you might have got out. It's hard to say where you got out. 50 to 60 ticks. And EMD is $10 a tick. So essentially you're looking at a one and done trade there. That's what we call about one and done trades around the news events. Now if you have a goal, if your goal is 500 to 600 a day, 450 a day in trading, then this one trade was it. That's it. That's your one and done. News event, what we're doing is looking for increased volatility. And the other thing that helped us, of course, if you recall, sort of emphasizing the importance of trading volatility around news, is if you recall, we had a high energy time around 7:06. I think it was 7:06, which was right here. So in addition to high impact news events, we had a high energy time within a couple of 6 minutes of that event, and we knew that something was going to happen. And of course you see here that it did. There was very nice follow through, and it broke through that pivot and ran all the way to the next one. Questions on the EMD trade? I do have one other chart to show. It was very similar to this. I don't have it all sort of marked up like the other chart, but it's very similar, and I want to drag it over. This is YM. Now this is $5 a tick. And so in terms of risk per contract, it's about half of what the Russell TF and EMD are. But what I want to show real quick on here is that you had the consolidation on YM was down in here. And the breakout occurred when it came through this resistance level and up through here, right about 7:05, kind of right. Here's the news event right here. 7 o'clock was right about there. And we had an inkling, if you're trading YM, it was really strange because YM sort of was lagging the other markets. If you go back and look at this same time frame on EMD, for instance, but when 7 o'clock came along, let's see if I can scoot this chart over a little bit and consolidate it down so you can see the same time frames. All right, yeah, you can see here that the EMD and the Russell and even NASDAQ, if you recall, NQ, had already been running up. And YM lagged a little bit. See how YM was kind of hovering near the lows, and then it took these swings out? So your buy entry would have been actually when it came through this pivot. If you have a resistance area very close to a pivot, you're going to go a couple of ticks above the pivot, and your buy entry would have been somewhere on that candle right there on YM. And of course, you can see it popped up right here to this next pivot. Now, there's a trade-off when you trade pivot to pivot. The good news is that if you take the money at the pivot you've banked your coin for the run. Okay, and it would have taken you out probably somewhere, I don't know, in one of these candles over here. The other, the downside of taking it is that sometimes you leave some money on the table if the market continues to run as it did with YM here. See how it's continuing to kind of grind higher? The other alternative, of course, is you can trail your stop. Trail your stop, trail your stop, and you very well might still be in this trade. Traders who trade the pivot to pivot take the money at the pivot and then look for reentry. So sometimes that's something that makes traders a little uncomfortable, is the fact that they bank that coin and now you're back in looking for probe or breakout type setups. So that's a trade-off you have to work with yourself. Some people like to bank the money, the coin at the pivot. Other traders like to trail stops and let the market run. And there's benefits and trade-offs to both approaches. There were some questions earlier about learning the system and learning the indicators and getting a feel for how to trade. And I want to show this in our subscriber area. Most of you already know this, but before I do that, is there any questions on the trades from after the news? Trading high energy and news around 7 o'clock Pacific today. Questions on the breakout trades? EMD, I didn't have a Russell and NQ chart. They look very similar to this. Basically taking the breakout, trading pivot to pivot. NASDAQ and Russell. I know Gary was trading Russell this morning. But let me bring down this subscriber page here in the subscriber area for those of you that were asking questions about it a little bit earlier. When you sign up for and become a subscriber, you get access to this area right here. And I'm not going to go through all this because there's quite a bit on here. There's a trader's kit, instructional videos, setups for the alerts, and all those sorts of things. But down here is where we have the recordings of the live webinars. So a couple of you were asking about sort of a ramp-up time, how quickly you can learn. It's really sort of a function of how much time you have to dedicate to attending webinars and watching recordings of webinars. In this case here, you can see just these up here alone. These are more the discretionary manual webinar recordings where we look at the indicators and the entries like you see documented on this chart to the left. That's these recordings right here. And we have different topics. Here was one that Rich did last Saturday, trading high energy 5-minute breakout zones. This is very good. I watched this the other day. It's pretty good video. Trading the news. I'm not going to go through. You see all this. So, what happens here, if you can take some time on a long weekend or after hours when you have a couple hours of downtime, what you want to do is come in and download a half a dozen or so of these and watch them. Because what will happen is you'll start to understand the terminology, and when you start to see setups on your charts like you have over here and on YM over here, the trades, once you get your chart set up on your own desktop, will start to make sense to you. You'll start to see, so when we say, hey, this is a potential breakout at 12,501 or whatever, or look for probe support down here at 12,465 or whatever commentary you're hearing, live in the room, it's going to make a lot more sense to you. Or, we're looking for a target at this pivot up at 12,539. Look to bank some coin up here. So when you hear terminology like that, that's precisely what we're referring to. Pivot to pivot in the direction of the trend. And most days, particularly news days, and you're going to get some kind of movement in this time frame here, 7 o'clock Pacific, 9 Central, 10 Eastern. More days than not, you have a strong, high likelihood of potential on the equities of potential one-and-done trades right around this time frame. This is when you want to perk your trading ears and eyes up and get ready to jump in, and particularly on news days with high energy right next to it, to load the boat and take your trades.